Yeah. What
Yay!
is up, everybody? Yeah or
You went
yay?
with a yeah today.
Man,
What is
300
going
308
on?
episodes.
Like, I don't even know you.
You don't? Welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 308. We hope that you are having a fantastic Monday. We are starting the show just a little bit later than we have been in the past few weeks. We wanted to accommodate our guest schedule because she's a very important guest. We've had her on recently, actually, episode 299, which, was about 2 months ago, kind of at the beginning of when all of what was going on started. We wanted to bring her back on because we had lots of questions and lots of conversations in the past week or so regarding the new normal and things that people are encountering out there in public right now during the COVID-19 crisis as states begin to reopen and people start getting back out there into the world. So we wanted to sort of address some of these with Danielle and how we can navigate the waters in the coming weeks, months ahead of us. So our guest tonight, Danielle Snyder, is going to be joining us. We appreciate all of you joining us tonight as well. So sit back, relax, everyone. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live. It begins now. Ginger Runner. Yay! What is up, everybody? Yeah. Yes. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 308. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit of it with us. We're starting a little bit later in the evening, but it's still daylight out, which is nice.
There's still a lot of daylight out.
Still a lot of daylight. We're going to have daylight well past tonight's episode, so we might be able to go out for a walk or barbecue or I don't know.
We don't have a barbecue.
I realized that. After I said it. Tonight we have a very fantastic episode because our guest is incredibly knowledgeable. She's been a guest on the show before. We had her on episode 299, which was right around the start of the COVID-19 crisis. We found ourselves, both Kim and myself, sort of navigating life, not knowing how to process the anxieties and fears that were omnipresent at that moment in time. We are now removed from that time about 2 months. A lot has taken place in the world, in our local communities, within our lives, and the anxieties and fears are certainly still there. They are beginning to shift and change. Kim and I have had some conversations over the last few weeks of how things are looking differently as we go out into the world, and whether it's going for a trail run and encountering a lot of people at a trailhead or going to the grocery store and just how things are different and how we can sort of navigate the adaptation back into normalcy, or can we find normalcy again? And our guest tonight will hopefully be able to shed some light on tools and maybe we can use to sort of get through that. But Danielle Snyder, our guest tonight, is a fantastic resource for you. Mm-hmm. So we are live with, of course, our live audience. So if you have questions, Kim.
Yeah. The setup was a little different and it caught me off guard, I think.
Yeah. I'm trying to change it up.
Thanks for changing it up on the fly.
You're welcome.
I think I was half plugged into the chat room. People are talking about your random some sort of sports ball hat that you're wearing. People are like, what is going on? That's not running apparel. We were just chatting before the show that a lot of us have just been living in our running clothes or casual loungewear.
Pretty much.
Which is totally fine.
99% of the time, 1% dedicated to the Mariners.
But yes, hello, live chat room. We will be joined by our wonderful guest, Danielle, in just a second. But as always, if you guys have questions for Danielle, please pop them in the chat room.
We'll
we can
answer
cover
as many as you want.
Everything and anything.
Yeah.
I know some things have come up in the past few daily brews that we'll hopefully touch on. But yeah, I
feel like we'll touch on some themes tonight with Danielle, and you are more than welcome to bring those questions for Danielle tonight. And we also will point out that Danielle is, of course, a small business, and she does this for a living. So she provides guidance for a lot of athletes that we know.
Coaching
services and stuff like that. She works with so many different athletes and is just a fantastic resource for people who are maybe looking for someone to talk to through counseling or therapy or any of that sort of thing. She's just a fantastic resource. Before we introduce our guest, Danielle, we do have some individuals that we like to thank at the top of every show, and those are our Patreon supporters. It is because of our Patreon crew that we are able to do this week after week, even throughout everything that's taken place in the last 2 months. Our community has really stepped up and allowed us to continue to do this full time, which is we can't say thank you enough. Two individuals at that top tier of Patreon, Brian Sands, who's been a longtime supporter, just a fantastic human being, has a a wonderful story of inspiration as well, having lost over 100 pounds in his running journey, ran his first marathon at age 50, his first 50K. He's training. I'll let him, if he's in the chat room, spoil something that he signed up for. That is big. We're so proud of him. He's such a badass. And also a big thank you to Chris Lee out of Hong Kong. Chris is an organization there called Trailblazer. It showcases all the local trails and races and events that take place in that region. He also has a brick and mortar there. Again, a really wonderful human. So big shout out to Chris and Brian. And finally, we are so honored. We talked about this, I think, when Danielle actually was on before, but we don't take sponsors for the show. We wanted to make one exception, and that was for a beer sponsor. We've talked about this since episode -10, that if we had a beer sponsor jump in, that we would gladly do it. But we're so thankful that Sufferfest has stepped up. Sufferfest has been a longtime friend of ours. Not the cans of beer, but the actual founders of the company, like Caitlin and all their athletes and stuff. They're great. They're a great company. They make great beer. They have their new flavor. I finally got it. It's their Gut Check.
I also have
Is that the new
different
one?
new flavor.
I'm drinking
I
their
noticed
Gut
you
Check.
didn't put this one in the fridge. I put it in the fridge because I knew that this is the one that I wanted to try today.
Sorry. I was pretty much very selfishly. I put the Gut Check IPA in the fridge today. It's 100 calories, 6 carbs, and I'm about to taste it. It's their new IPA.
And I have the Shred. And I grabbed this because this is a Kolsch style beer with honey and cayenne, and Kolsch is like my cup of tea. I also love supporting this brand, this company, because they are a female founded brand.
Yep.
And
I love it. They have it right there on their can.
Super important to me.
Proudly female founded. We craft beer for those who like to earn it. So shout out to Sufferfest. Thank you so much for the support on Ginger Runner Live for the next few episodes. I'm pretty excited to work with them because the beer is good and the company is great.
Yes.
Without further ado, I want to introduce our wonderful guest. She's been patiently waiting for us to she's like, drink the beer already.
All right, guys, we get it. We get it.
Without further ado, let's welcome her back to the show, Danielle Snyder.
Yay. Hey,
how are you?
Welcome back.
I'm doing, it's funny, like when people ask that, I try to answer authentically and like pause and be like, I think I said this last time, like, how am I doing? In this moment, I'm doing great. I'm here on the show. How are you guys?
It's funny that you actually said that because I think since you were on the show, Kim and I do the same thing now. We kind of do a moment of check-in, kind of going, wait, how am I? How am I right now? Because I think it's important to be, you pointed that out to us. It's like, it's important to be honest to yourself and just, you don't need to sugarcoat it and be like, I'm great when you're not great.
It's like we're almost trained to just be like, I'm great.
Everything's good.
Everything's fine.
Today is good. Today's good.
I'm trying to, if like, it's more manageable to talk about the moment rather than the, like, well, everything's going to shit. No, actually, like right now, it's great.
When we had you on last, it was the beginning of all of this. And there were so many unknowns. We didn't know trajectory. We didn't know how long. There was so many unknowns. And that provided a lot of the fear and anxiety that Kim and I were feeling and our viewers were feeling. And you were fantastic at sort of navigating that, also not knowing the future yourself. Now that we're a few months into this, have you noticed yourself thinking about things differently, or are days getting easier? Is there any sort of routine that you're finding yourself falling into?
Well, it's interesting because like prior, or the kind of when we first started to talk, I remember discussing how like our brains and bodies will find some type of normalcy within this and not quite knowing how that would happen. 2 months later, like this does feel extremely routine and almost there's like, this is my norm. I had a conversation with someone recently and they were like, how do you feel about going back to like quote unquote more normal life? And I was like, my life is the same as it always has been. And then I was like, wait, no, it's not. Like, it's so different. But I had like completely forgotten like how much things have changed because of it. So I do feel like our bodies and brains kind of adapt to survive, but there is this underlying increase of stress, which is prevalent through all of our lives. in a way that like maybe we aren't feeling it as acutely, but it still exists.
That's been, I think we talk about that all the time whenever we kind of reference our lives, like because we work from home, and I believe you're the same. I think you're also able to work from home with your clients and stuff. There is this sense of, well, everything's kind of the same within the walls.
Yeah, internally in our house, everything is the same.
Yeah. Like we wake up the same.
Mostly.
Our coffee routine is the same. Like we try to find time to work and like really focus, and we kind of do the same things we normally do. It's every second of thinking outside the walls where things are okay. Well, for the longest time, we couldn't go to trails because all the trails were closed, and
right.
It's just one of those that was different. There was a lot of different going on, but it felt kind of the same. Are you finding clients are saying the same sort of thing? Like, are people recognizing patterns and routine that are similar, but then there's this overlying or underlying sort of sense of deviance from the normalcy?
I think it depends on the situation. So like I can say that like for my own life, there is like I'm working, thankfully, and I'm been able to establish a routine with individuals who have like lost their jobs and are experiencing like a whole different level of stress. I would say that their lives look a lot differently than, those of us who are fortunate and still have our jobs, in that like in order to, even people who've lost their jobs, like we establish a sense of normalcy or routine and kind of put our blinders on. So we're not as in tune to how many deaths there are per day.
Right.
We're not like following the news. Most of us, I think some people still are, but they're like, we've adapted to this being our norm, which is good and bad, right? Like a part of it means that we're stepping into this place of like complacency of like people are still dying and we're no longer, we're okay. So we're moving forward, and other people are still, in the throes of that crisis.
And I want to also start by pointing out, again, you're a licensed in social work, and this is something that you do for a living. Like you talk to people like us who maybe are dealing with kind of daily issues or even long-term issues, right? Let's start there. Just kind of what you do, so those who maybe are tuning in for the first time, maybe didn't get to watch episode 299, kind of where you're coming to us from and exactly why we want you on the show. Sorry, did you lose us?
No, were you asking me what I do?
Oh, yeah. Let's
okay, I was like, are you announcing it?
Sorry, no, if you could inform our viewers exactly what you do on a regular basis, because we know you work with lots of athletes and lots of people like us.
I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a wellness coach and a running coach. And so people generally seek out support for all hosts of struggles, including like athletic performance. And during this time, a lot of what I've been working with is how to adapt and become resilient in the face of crisis. And it's been interesting because a part of a program that I studied in looks at athletes, and specifically like elite athletes, and how their lives have been changed due to the loss of the season, and how it is stemming in the increase of mental health conditions within them, as well as like overall across the board of like, so in order to keep society safe, we have asked people to do things that are really, really horrible for their mental health. And from it, we're seeing the emergence of more depression, more thoughts of like hopelessness, helplessness, isolation, and questioning, because there's no like direct line of what we should or shouldn't be doing. And so a lot of people are confused and scared. And as things reopen up, it's, we're all looking for that guidance of like, well, what is the right thing to do? Like,
right.
Who do we follow? How do we stay safe? How do we protect others? And how do we respond to like that people are still ill and yet like life goes on.
I think that's a great sort of segue just kind of into the beginning of this conversation, because I realized this last time that I didn't say this up front, and because this conversation can be triggering for some, and like as someone who does suffer from anxiety, and if you are watching this and for any reason you need to talk to somebody at any point, Danielle is a perfect resource. This is why we bring her on the show, and we have in the at least episode 299 and now 308.
Mm-hmm.
It's because she is such a great resource. She is there to provide you with someone to listen, and she's fantastic at what she does. We have so many friends who swear by Danielle and would shout her name from the rooftops. So we'll start there, just in case any of today's conversations start going down a path where maybe you need someone to talk to, something like that. Because Kim and I have talked about this over the last few weeks, just how our lives are going to feel a bit different for a while. We've been dealing with sort of this sense of, I'll be totally honest, we've had moments of anger, outwardly focused anger, of like, we find ourselves doing certain things to keep ourselves safe or to follow certain guidelines that we're finding to be the most helpful to keep as many people safe as possible, whether that's wearing a mask when we go outside or avoiding trails or driving far, all these sorts of things that we want to do to help those around us. But we find ourselves getting angry and caught up in the fact that there are others who maybe aren't going that same sort of path and following those same sort of guidelines. And I guess this is going to be something I feel is going to be very common, where some people do some things and some people do other things.
And varying state to state, country to country,
State to
even
state,
the guidelines
country.
are vastly different.
Absolutely.
Right?
And so maybe you can provide us with a little bit of insight or a tool or something that we can look at when we find ourselves in a situation of like, I am mad at this person who I don't know who they are, but I'm feeling this anger. How can I sort of process that?
Right. And just to quickly dovetail on what you're saying to address that, we do have a live chat room and people are asking questions. Paul in the chat room is asking something very similar. Paul is saying, how do we deal with the glare you get on a trail as someone is judging you, or as you judge them for wearing or not wearing a mask or other face covering? So,
and I realize this is a huge question.
Yeah.
And there might not be one right answer. So I'm sorry to just like load it up, Danielle. Here we go.
Great. I've been waiting all day to answer this question. The first thing I want to do is acknowledge that it's okay to have feelings. And I know I said this in the previous show, and I say that to so many people, but feelings are not actions. So it is okay to be confused and frustrated and annoyed that that person is not wearing a mask, or that person's wearing a hazmat suit, or whatever is going on. It makes sense because we are in a state of crisis, and we're still in a state of crisis, even though our like overall state is no longer maybe as high as a crisis. There are still so many unknowns. Our body are still pumping adrenaline and cortisol more quickly than they were pre-pandemic. And so the first thing I want to embrace is that having feelings and confusion and frustration and anger is okay as long as you don't act on it. So, punching the person who's not wearing a mask, first of all, I wouldn't get that close to someone right now. Secondly, not really going to help the problem. So it is important to like acknowledge the difference and allow yourself to feel it. Because the way I see it right now is a lot of this is stemming from a place of fear. Like there is so much fear and unknown right now that it takes kind of the space of acknowledging like I'm scared when we go into that anger phase of being frustrated at what we perceive is right or wrong. Because one of the like things that I keep coming down to is like I would like to have a certain protocol of what is appropriate or right, and I don't know that one exists in a way that is promoted through all the agencies, government agencies. And so it's easy to kind of step into like my way is right and think that the other person's way is wrong, when in reality, like, yes, maybe your way is safer. And so it is maybe not helpful to, like, in the moment, maybe have a conversation about it with another person who is not open. So,
Mm.
like, on a trail, if someone is not wearing a face mask and you are wearing a face mask, there are a couple different ways that you could respond to that. You could yell at them. You could walk by them. You could jump off the trail and turn your back and say, have a good day. And ultimately, what you decide to do has got to be something that feels okay within your moral and ethical values, as well as keeps you safe.
Mm.
So I don't think there's one right answer or wrong answer. I just think you have to kind of like lay out your options and then do what feels best and safest for you.
It's one, I think acknowledging the feelings is like you said, that's been kind of the most important step for us is and we got this from your episode 299. I can't tell you how many human moments we've had over the last 2 months, and every time one of us, and it's great having a partner.
Yeah, I'll be like, I'm having a terrible day. I need to have a meltdown. And you're like, you're having a human moment.
Like, we'll remind each other, and
and I'm like, oh, he's right.
That's a Danielle Snyder thing, courtesy of episode 299. So definitely go back and watch that. But we've had those moments where we'll outwardly express, let's say, trails just opened up here in Washington State. We've been able to go out and enjoy the trails finally after 2 months of not being able to do it. So it's been fantastic, but a part of that has been us also kind of dealing with those emotions from time to time. And we've identified them and gone, okay, I feel angry because of this. And the other person's like, you're having a human moment. It is okay to feel what you're feeling. We're trying to take your tutelage and like implement it. And it's been really interesting to see how we feel after actually just identifying what it is that we're feeling and why we're feeling it.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to sort of see like, okay, well, I'm over it. You know, like it's been neat to see how quickly we sort of just go control the controllables. And right now I can control how I feel.
Yeah.
You know? And that's all courtesy of you. Like that's been one of the best things from episode 299 was that we sort of took that.
Yeah, Ingen in the chat room says, at the beginning of lockdown, I spent a lot of energy being annoyed with others who were not giving space on the power line trail in our neighborhood. But then I realized all the negative energy was just affecting myself and not helping anyone. Now I try really hard to not judge, but it's not always easy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
As we start to... Actually, let's get to a live question before I sort of dovetail into the next part of the conversation. But I know Kim's pulled a bunch of these questions. If you have questions for Danielle, drop them into the live chat room. Kim's been pulling them a bunch aside here. Let's get to a couple of those, and then we'll move to the next one.
Yeah, sure. So this question is from Lydia. Lydia asked, Danielle, I'm just getting back into running, which feels overwhelming even when the world is normal. I struggle with anxiety and depression, and even getting out of the door is a challenge. How do you set aside the dysfunction and uncertainty going on in the world right now and find peace during runs?
Yeah, that's a big question because I think a lot of us are experiencing that search for pre-corona peace while running when it is difficult to find, like before I was more apt to find trails that were empty than I am now. And it's a lot more easy to step into that peace and that quiet when there are not people around and we're not fearing. And so what I want to encourage you to do is take it step by step. It's a lot to expect like that fear to dissipate from leaving your house and getting on the trails. And so what I would do is try to step outside for like 5 minutes and go for a walk around your house and kind of create that normalcy and that comfort zone within more of your control. And then as you start to feel a little bit more solid, then you can start to expand your comfort zone a little bit more. And when you messaged me and you talked about that, I apply that to the trail too. So it would be great if like we could just leave the anxiety at home and just go and run. And that's not realistic for a lot of people right now. Mm-hmm. They are still it's that interesting paradoxical situation where trails are our freedom and our peace, but at the same time, like being on them right now feels very nerve-wracking. And so again, it's kind of like giving yourself that that permission slip or that freedom to be like, okay, I am feeling really nervous and I'm going to go do 5 minutes on the trail today and see if that makes me feel more comfortable and see how that goes with interactions. And then I can go back home. Like, I don't have to commit to doing something that makes me uncomfortable, and 100% avoiding it is going to just make that anxiety even bigger. So it's finding like that balance between, yeah, you're going to feel these things, and how can you expand your comfort zone a little by little to just start to follow the new guidelines.
That's been immediately helpful for us every time that we've been venturing to the trails, because everything is now newly open. They're very popular. Trailheads are very busy. And what we don't want to happen is the trails to be closed back down, or to things to step backwards as far as progress is concerned. So we've been having those conversations of, let's just go to the trailhead and see if the trailhead's busy. And if it's busy, we go home. We figure something else out. If it's not busy and we get onto the trails and we find that there's tons of hikers out on the trails, we call it. Like, there's no point in, it's like these little steps. I feel like we got that from you in the last episode too, and it's just been really helpful. Before we get to some more live questions, I kind of wanted to get into the side of the conversation as far as how we all might be a little bit different moving forward. I don't know much about trauma. I feel like I've experienced trauma in my life, but it's come out in various ways in my running and anxieties and stuff like that. But this is kind of this underlying slow burn that's affected everybody. Is there a routine or a pattern that people may just experience and may not know what it is in the future? Like, are there ways that people can process what's happening now or in the coming weeks and months as society seems to get back to normal, and some of us may not feel like it's back to normal?
Yeah. So this is like a very complex question. And the first thing I want to identify is, oftentimes what happens is trauma links to past trauma. So when you are experiencing this trauma, it's very likely that past traumas can get triggered. And because of those, you associate similar emotions to past traumas. Like, if you experience a trauma that makes you feel out of control, this is like the ultimate feeling out of control. And then those two link, and you'll experience this more. It will be more impactful than maybe someone who hasn't experienced multiple traumas. And one of the ways to manage and negotiate trauma is by processing it. So being able to acknowledge and talk about your feelings with a trusted professional, or someone that you trust, is really important. Because as a society, I think our inclination is to push this underneath the rug and keep moving forward. And we see this happening all the time. Like, it's already happening in the news, that, we're on to the next thing. And what often happens with really high stressful situations is, when we're in it, we have to survive. And so we're really good at putting one foot in front of the other. And then when things feel safer or calmer is when we actually start to experience those symptoms of like grief and loss and fear. And so I guess I want to normalize that, even though the world may be going back to normal, that does not mean that you are going to feel normal. You may experience things more intensely now that you may feel a little bit safer.
I love that we're talking about that, because my brain goes to the place where there might be people who have never talked about past traumas, or may not even be able to identify that they've experienced past traumas, or may not be willing to speak on that this is a trauma, or that they're feeling anything right now. And as things begin to shift, or like you said, the news starts covering topics that don't deal with COVID-19, and work starts asking people to come back into the office, and people will have this outward appearance that the world is going back to normal, maybe experiencing or feeling things that they can't identify. I'm glad that we're talking about that, because I that's what I picture happening, is people who maybe have never dealt with this before, or even talking about it, are going to all of a sudden start thinking, wait, why do I feel a certain way? Or why am I not ready to go back? I've never felt these things. So in that case, is the best thing to do like reach out to someone like you or to a mental health professional and seek
Yeah.
guidance, or is there other tools?
Yeah. I mean, not to be like, I try to find the line between being, I'm trying to think of the word, like they are predicting that from this, there's going to be an increase in like mental health symptoms, essentially. Like
Mm-hmm.
that the big kind of ongoing concerns, besides economic concerns and loss of life, is that this underlying mental health need is going to arise. And one of those things that can really help decrease the ongoing trauma of it is by acknowledging it. I mean, it feels like it feels like, how could it be that quote unquote simple? But there's so many times in my life that I've experienced like great loss, and I am become so robotic and so disconnected and not attached that I don't actually pause and identify what I'm feeling. And it's funny, like I go on Instagram and like people are, baking bread, they're, cleaning their houses, they're doing renovations, they're busy, which totally I am too. Like I'm doing a pull-up contest. I'm doing crazy things because it's like, I have all this quote unquote time, but a part of me wants to encourage people to like lean in and feel during that time rather than just use it to sweep those emotions under the rug. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be scared. Like this is a sad and scary time.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you won't have happiness and laughter and joy within your sadness. It's just both exist right now.
I really appreciate you saying that. We always talk about on the show people having a place to be open and to talk about that. The show is certainly one of those places, and Danielle has been such a fantastic resource. I wish we've had her on 100 shows at this point, but we do have a number of questions from our live audience, which is the whole reason we have Danielle on the show today. So Kim, what do we got?
Yeah, first, this is just a comment from Maria Dalzot in the chat room. And Maria says, Danielle, the last show you talked about how when gazelles get scared, they huddle together and shake it off. The next day, a car hit my elbow as I was running through a crosswalk. I was so shocked and scared. My first thought was to go home, but I sat down and cried and then got up and finished my run because I was okay, just like the gazelles. So thank you.
Aw.
And she said in another comment that she'd been meaning to tell you that since that day, but just hadn't been able to tell you. So
Well, I'm really glad you're okay. and I'm glad you did your own process of shaking it off. I mean, I do like, I wish those experiences never happened to people. And at the same time, like, it's time and time again, those stories are shared of like, yeah, this, like, it does work. It does help when we like allow ourselves to feel once we're safe.
And we've had Maria on the show a number of times as well. She's a registered dietitian, fantastic Pacific Northwestern runner, total badass. Let's get to some more of these live questions. Thank you, Maria, for the comment.
yeah, a question from Anouk in the chat room. They asked how to deal with not being able to plan anything for the future. I'm okay with dealing day to day, but as someone who used to use building towards future goals, that's giving me some major anxiety.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think that is so common right now, especially for us competitive. And I say competitive as in you race, you are competitive. And that we are not able to have kind of these like pieces of cake or carrot or whatever, nuggets in our life. I was like trying to think of the term, and I was like, I don't know. I'm just gonna throw out a lot of different one speaks to you. But yeah, it's really, really challenging. I think like that's like one thing that I would say we continue, like we're not going to know, I think, for a while in terms of races. And I have a lot of athletes asking me like, well, what, like, do we keep training? What does this look like? And, one of the things that I think is really important is the ability to use these lessons to be more resilient in our thinking and within our brains. And so a lot of times what happens during races is things don't go as planned. And as frustrating as it is to take this horrible time and use it as a way to grow and learn, I am trying to embrace this like, okay, well, if my crew doesn't show up at an aid station, what can I do? How can I be prepared? And then translating it into, okay, this race gets canceled. I'm going to act as if this race is going on. I'm going to train for it. And if the race gets canceled, then what am I going to do instead? Or how am I going to navigate and create something fun for myself so I'm still getting the process and the reward?
Got it. It kind of spurned a thought in my head too, just regarding as we have found ourselves kind of getting back to the trails and trying to figure out how many days a week we can get out there without overloading the system and that sort of thing. This is going to happen across the country and across the world where people are going to start to incorporate trail running back into their lives. And is there a way to continue to balance it without overwhelming ourselves and routine and like, is there anything that we can do to prepare ourselves in our training, specifically with running, to help prepare ourselves for maybe personal objectives or adventures through getting out there to the trails and stuff like that in a timely way where we're not overwhelming ourselves and getting exhausted?
So as runners, we often like to focus on day-to-day progress when in
Right.
reality, it helps us to zoom out. And so oftentimes when I am not just thinking about like the pandemic, but before the pandemic, if I had to like skip a run because I don't know, life got busy or something got hurt or whatever, I would apply the 10-10-10 rule. And so I kind of zoom out and I think like, okay, in 10 days, if this doesn't go as planned, how much is it going to impact me? Well, in 10 days, if I miss one run, I might maybe still be bummed about it. Most likely in 10 days, I'm going to forget about it. And then I zoom out some more to 10 weeks. How much is this like training thing one time? I'm not saying multiple days. I'm saying once going to impact me in 10 weeks. Probably not that much.
Right.
And then I zoom out again to 10 months. Is it really going to be that big of a deal if I choose to run roads versus trail for this time period in 10 months? I mean, no, it's not. It's not going to make or break me. And so I often pause and once I allow myself to say like, it's okay to feel that way, then I try to like apply some logic to my anxiety.
It makes perfect sense. Like I don't think I'd heard the 10-10-10 rule, but it's we often talk about zooming out and sort of looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
But even just looking in a 10-day, 10-week, 10-month sort of period is such a simple way of looking kind of at our routines. Like our last 2 months of road running, which we rarely do. We're always going to the mountains and trails before all this. And now we're road running. And every day a road run's just like, it's taking forever. And I'm like, oh, this is so boring. How is this going to alter my overall fitness?
Yeah.
And being able
getting
to
so out of shape.
Shape.
Like this isn't helping anything.
And being able to zoom out and go, dude, you still like you just ran 10 miles on the road. Like that's
And,
not
you're healthy enough to go run.
right.
You have the ability to step outside and go, yeah.
So different to be able to zoom out.
Yeah, and also you can hold two truths. Like totally, I would much rather be on the trails.
Right.
And I'm still gaining aerobic and anaerobic fitness from doing my speed work and my regular running on roads.
Yeah.
I think also like being more adaptive in our own schedules. So like I'm an early runner and I'm going even earlier to trails right now.
Yeah.
And so people are like, wow, that's really, really like early. Like, I don't know, some like Tuesday mornings I wake up at 4 and I'm out on the trails by 4:45, 5 o'clock. I don't see one person. And so for me, I'm not choosing to do that every week. Like some days I am going at on trails at like the most popular hour, and that's a choice I'm making. But other days I'm like, okay, well, this is important to me to not feel anxious about this run, and I want to be on the trails alone. And so I do. I sacrifice some sleep, you know. And so I think it's all about like picking and choosing what is best for you. Like, do you need sleep more than you need trails, or can you once a week safely get to the trails in the morning before it's light?
I loved, Inga brings up in the chat room here, and I love it as well. The hold two truths. It is crazy how much I feel like I tie myself to one thing of like, I'm running on roads,
Yes.
therefore I am not getting my workout right,
Yeah.
like how I want it. Where the reality is, yeah, you can want to run on trails. You can also be still getting your fitness. Like, I'd never thought of it that way, Danielle. Bring in the knowledge.
Ding, ding, ding.
Of course, we have tons of live questions here from our wonderful viewers. Kim, what do we got for Danielle?
Yeah, we have a couple really good ones here to close the show out. Question from Darren. Darren says, Danielle, can you talk about grounding exercises and when/how we can use them? Can you give us an example? I found them to be extremely helpful.
Yeah. So the reason why we do grounding exercises is because when our system gets into flight, fight, or freeze, we go into our amygdala or our what it's called our reptile brain, and that kind of looks like your brainstem or your amygdala. So I like to do that. And so when you get stressed, you go into that center, that fear center, and oftentimes what happens is you feel dysregulated. That's when you're more prone to like anxiety attacks or anxiety or making rash decisions. And so the goal of grounding exercises is to help take you from the brainstem or the amygdala into your prefrontal cortex, which helps you reason and think things through. The really cool thing about being a human is that we have prefrontal cortex. And so the grounding exercises, usually they can, like we did it I did one, I believe the first time I came on, where you found 5 things, the color blue or red, and then engaging all your senses. So another like simple grounding technique that I'll have runners do sometimes is finding 5 new beautiful things that they've never seen on a trail, or 5 new sounds, or 4 new sounds, or something that kind of takes them from freezing or fighting or fleeing and helps them step into their like thinking brain. So a time to do that would be like, for me, right after I fall, because I fall on trails a lot, I like my adrenaline spikes. And so like generally what happens after I fall is I like jump up.
Right.
And I'm like, my heart is beating really, really fast. And my inclination is like, I have to go, I have to move. And pausing and breathing and like looking around at 5 different things to kind of get my adrenal glands like back on track and calming myself down. It could be any time that you start to feel anxious on the trails, or, after an argument, anything like that. It's really helpful to use the grounding exercises to allow yourself to pause.
I think grounding exercises are like one of the tools that also, again, back to episode 299, have been really, really helpful for me. You gave us one on that episode, and of course I've been using it just as a fantastic way to sort of trigger myself to get out of that anxious side of my brain. I know that Danielle, you probably have a myriad of grounding exercises, correct? Like for different.
I mean, and anyone, like, this isn't some secret that you can go online and Google. Not to downplay my profession, because I went to school for a really long time to learn these techniques, but you can go online and Google like grounding exercises and find one that works for you. Because again, different brains, different bodies, different techniques.
Of course. Let's get to maybe one more question and we'll wrap up with Danielle.
Yeah, a question from Megan. Megan says, Danielle, you mentioned traumas linking. Do we have the ability to break those links?
So the awareness piece is really helpful for us to be able to disconnect the links. And by being able to recognize that when we are vulnerable and certain emotions arise, they are more likely to connect us to those past emotions, is key to moving forward. Because it's more about how you're feeling that connects them than the fact that like a trauma connects to a past trauma.
Got it.
And so by verbalizing it and talking about it and being able to identify the feelings helps you become more in control and unlink those traumas.
I can't thank Danielle enough for always just being so open with her knowledge and being able to provide our community with a little bit of guidance. I highly encourage anyone who's watching this episode or listening to the podcast or anything to reach out to Danielle. Danielle, can you just let people know where they can find you in case they do need to reach out or they want to schedule a time to chat with you and pursue your services?
Sure. You can email me, DanielleRSnyder @gmail.com. Sorry, I don't know why that's so funny always when I'm giving out my email. It's like I try to go slow and then I'm like, oh, I just gotta get it out. And also, like, I don't know, if you want to see like goofy stories, you can follow me on Instagram. Sometimes I post tips, mostly they're just goofy stories.
I encourage you to follow Danielle, on Instagram as well. It's fun to just see what you're getting up to too, because I mean, one, you have beautiful trails around your house, and it's really cool to kind of see your region, Oregon, and just how beautiful it is there too. Super fun to follow. Remind people where they can find you, because I know it's funny.
Oh,
I like
hey,
it.
I want to
Is
put
it
you
Danielle
on the
Smells?
spot. This is fun. Oh yeah. So, oh yeah.
I forget if it's Danielle Smells or if it's Dan Smells, D Smells.
Are you saying I smell?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's true. No.
Well, Danielle
I showered
Smells, but her
today.
Instagram is.
Oh, Dielle. DIELLESMELLS. I don't even know how to spell it.
If you go to our Instagram, we linked Danielle's Instagram on our stories today. You can go follow her along and follow the adventures and everything like that. But yes, please reach out to Danielle if you have any further questions. We are going to move into our after show. Our after show, any questions that were remaining here, plus for our Patreon crew, we'll ask some residual questions of Danielle. But if you'd like to join us for our after show, you can do so simply by going to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to all the archive after shows and tonight's after show as well with Danielle. Danielle, again, we just can't thank you enough for being so open and providing so much insight. I feel like every episode that we get you on, it's super educational and enlightening, especially in this time when I personally feel like I spend so much time in my own head trying to figure out, what am I feeling? Why do I feel this way? What's going on in the world? How can I process that? So knowing that people like you exist in the world are really helpful.
We could spend a whole afternoon talking to each other in circles about what we're trying.
Like, what are you feeling? I'm feeling this. I'm also feeling that, but are you feeling it this way? Or, we kind of dig
just
ourselves.
trying to like help each other.
Just trying to help each other. So having people
also,
like you is so great.
I do want to plug, like, I know that telehealth, I mean, so like, I just want to really encourage people so strongly to like seek out support right now, whether it's like through me or anyone else. Like, I think the most important message is like, there is help out there and people exist and they're there to support you. And so telehealth right now is working to get you so you can do therapy in your home. I know that there are like so many other organizations as well that like offer support for mental health. And so whether it's me or someone else, like just find someone that you can start to connect and talk to, because it is isolating enough to be disconnected from friends. And there are ways to manage it a little bit easier. I'm not saying it's going to be, easy, but there will be less like there is support and more hope out there.
Absolutely love it. A big thank you to our wonderful guest tonight, Danielle Snyder. We're going to talk to her in our after show, ask some of these residual questions, because I know you pulled a bunch still aside. As with all of our after shows, you can go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner to join us there. But as with all of our Ginger Runner live episodes, at the end of these episodes, we'd like to recognize a member of the community who's kind of gone above and beyond and done some pretty awesome stuff out there. And during this time, it's amazing what people are still accomplishing, whether it's in their backyard, on their treadmill, on a stationary bike, or going around the block in their neighborhood, or going to local trails. So, Kim, we'd like to recognize a member of our crew. We call him the GR Crew Member of the Week. Who is this week's GR Crew Member of the Week?
This week's GR Crew Member of the Week is Meg Leach. Meg says, I just joined the community. Hi. And while I had fun running a 10 miler over the weekend, 4 miles of which were on the beach. Gorgeous. I'm
Mhm.
really proud of the fact that I hit over 100,000 words on the novel that I've been writing.
Wow.
Started when New York went on lockdown and hope to finish in the next few days. I just thought it was really
That is
cool and
cool.
unique, and it's not necessarily like a running based cool thing, but we've kind of been trying to feature all sorts of different stories in the crew. So
Congratulations, Meg. 100,000 words? What?
100,000 words.
I don't even know how many pages that is.
I
Yeah, right. I don't know what the topic is or what the story is. I can't wait to read it. Just because a member of our community wrote 100,000 words is pretty dang cool. I hope it's not all the same word. I'm imagining they're all different words. Huge congratulations, Meg. That is awesome. You are GR Crew Member of the Week. We are happy to recognize you and your amazing accomplishment. Another thank you to our guest. We're going to jump right into the after show with Danielle. So sit tight, Patreon crew. And we'll see you all next week, Monday, for Ginger Runner Live, episode 309. And in the meantime, get out there, train as hard as you want, virtually race harder, and party the hardest. Little tip. GRGR registration opens this week. GRGR is our Ginger Runner Global Run. It's now our 5th year doing this, and this year it's going to be July 6th through the 12th. 7 days of running challenges that are going to be a surprise each day, and registration opens this week. We're very excited because
and also helping to benefit. Sorry, I cut you off.
It's okay.
Also helping to benefit all sorts of really cool photographers and artists within the trail space.
A percentage of every registration fee will go to Howie Stern, Matt Trappy, Ryan Thrower, Nikki Frumpkin, Hillary Matheson, and Glenn Takayama. Those are artists and photographers who have lost their income due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So percentage of the registrations are going to go directly to them. And we're going to be supporting a bunch of small businesses as well, from Spring Energy, Squirrels Nut Butter, Run and Rabbit, Territory Run Company. The list goes on and on. So keep your eyes open on all of our social media channels this week when registration goes live. We're very excited to open this up to everybody, and we hope we can support people in a big way this year.
Yes.
All right, cool. We're going to move into the after show. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.